This is going to be a lot of fun because between Ron and myself, we will tell you the real story of the NFL. And the reason I say this is there are a lot of books out now talking about the league. But I would have to say, if I survive another couple of years, hopefully, that this is the only story that really tells the true story through my eyes with Ron's great writing about what it was really like, starting actually in the 30s. So basically, as we get into this, a couple of things I do want to say. Ron and I had made a proposal to Nebraska Press. And one of the people who is sitting here tonight, novelist William Martin, and his beautiful wife, and Miss Joanne O'Neill. You're damn lucky, Bill, believe me. Helped us. You're right. See, you're right. But the thing is, writing the proposal, which Ron had worked up, we had sent it to Bill, and he had been a great help in helping us get this proposal in Nebraska Press. So I do want to thank him a lot of what he did. Now, as far as the book is concerned, I will say this, that there is no other writer, and I mean this sincerely, that could have done this book. The reason is, if you're going to do something and tell the real history of the game, you can talk to somebody and they'll record it and write it. But in my opinion, the only reason that Ron Borges was the most important thing, besides his writing, is he understood what this time was like. And we are going to take you back in that time tonight, all the way back into the 40s and 50s. So the important thing is what he did, how he wrote it, and the other part of it, which could be another book in itself. It was really like Gone with the Wind of this book, because in between, as Ron will tell you, I had a very serious accident, which Commissioner Martin knows all about because he was there practically every day, but it was almost a 2-year hiatus in a book that started 2 years before. So this is a look at life, the NFL, the people who really made it. And it took, sometimes we went 6 or 8 hours on this book to bring you what we think is really one of the most interesting stories about the league. So without further ado, let me present Byron, Lord Byron, Ron Borges.
Thanks, Upton. One of the things that made this project interesting to me is I'd known Upton for a long time. Of course, as you probably all know, his dad was Bert Bell, who owned the Eagles. At one point in time, owned the Steelers, or half of the Steelers, the Steagles as they were, and was the commissioner of the league from 1946 after the war until he had a heart attack and died in Franklin Field in 1959, and Upton was there as a young guy and saw him in the stands in his last day. And so Upton really has grown up around football. He's been in the huddle of one form or another all his life and made football his life for 25 or 30 years. So that was the initial interest. The other thing I found, which I didn't know until we started, was his memory for these small details was incredible. Because as Bill can tell you, you start doing research, people tell you something, then you look it up and, wrong day, wrong month, wrong year, wrong person. And I don't think Upton gave me a half a dozen wrong dates or wrong assistant coaches from the Chicago Bears in 1941. It was amazing. Our most glaring miscue, which was caught by our friend Ernie Accorsi, who was a former, worked for Upton, and Upton got him started in pro football. He was a PR guy, and ultimately became the general manager of the Giants. But unbeknownst to us, he was a railroad buff, so we had him read the book because he had been with the Colts and would know a lot of this stuff. And so he calls me up, he's a terrific guy, and he calls me up and he's going on, he likes the book, and he said, but I found a glaring error, you got to fix this. And I thought, well, okay, what game did we mess up, or what coach do we have in the wrong situation? And he goes, He wasn't on the train you had him on going to Los Angeles in 1946. That's the wrong train. I said, what? What are you talking about? Turns out he was a railroad buff, and he said, no, it couldn't be the whatever it was, Chicago Zephyr. It had to be something else. So, well, fortunately, we didn't get caught up with bad railroad stories.
I need to know that stuff for my next novel.
Well, he's the man to talk to. It was unbelievable. Yeah, it was unbelievable. And one quick story about, as Upton alluded to, we're about halfway through this project, and Upton got involved in a terrible car accident. Bounced his car over various things. So I went to see him in the hospital. He had 37 broken bones, and he was not doing too great. And I looked at him, and I said, well, I once was a small college coach myself, so I said, okay, it's time for inspiration. This guy needs some inspiration. So I looked at him, and I said, listen, you SOB, there's one thing you cannot do is die before we finish this book, so let's get it going here. So he starts sort of laughing, which is causing him pain. The nurse comes flying in, and she's yelling at me, like, what are you doing making this guy laugh? He's got 37 broken bones. But he rallied pretty good. He did a good job. So I think without further ado, Upton, we'll just get into the story. And the first thing I want to ask you is, obviously your dad ran a league for a decade. Don Shula and many others feel he saved pro football during and after the war, and you were at his feet for all these years and around all these great players. What's the most important thing you learned about your dad and professional football?
Well, I think unlike today, and maybe it's hard to compare, particularly for the people, some of you your age, is that here's a man that was born to great wealth. His father was the Attorney General of Pennsylvania. His brother was the Governor and Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. His father was on the original Walter Camp Rules Committee. And here's a man, and it was quoted in the newspapers at the time, here was a man who was born to great wealth. As one writer said, he did his damn best to work us all the way down to being very poor. So his the one thing I think that stood out, and Ron and I have talked about it, and Ron's a very honest and straight guy, is I think he would be great even today as a commissioner because there was no BS. He never lied to reporters or players or anybody else or his children. This is what it was, and this is the way it would be. So I have great memories of him even to this day because he is the person that had a character that is totally lacking, in my opinion.
Well, one of the things we talk about in the book, and Upton can speak to in a second, is sort of the way pro football grew was football people were running football. His dad was a great college quarterback, threw the first touchdown pass in the Rose Bowl, back when they were throwing a watermelon around there instead of a football as you know it today, was a coach, was an owner. Most of the people that he dealt with, were football people, and they were the ones making the decisions. I think a lot of the problems they have today is a result of they've cut out the bulk of the football people in the upper management positions. So decisions are being made that change the nature of the game. And those of you who are football fans who watched a couple weeks ago that big controversy over whether or not Clay Matthews from the Packers landed on top of the quarterback after, well, if I'm running to Upton and tackle him and collide and he falls backwards, I'm probably going to fall on top of him. It's rather difficult for me to not fall on top of him. But this became a penalty. I think that is the type of thing, and Upton can speak to this. What do you think your dad would say if they said we're going to have a rule that you can't fall on top of each other?
That's all they did then, is fall on top of each other. But I think the biggest thing, and it's been brought out, as Ron pointed out, we're jumping around so much, and you'll read a lot of this in comparison in the book today, is that basically the original 5 owners, Bert Bell, George Hallis, George Preston Marshall, Tim Mara, these people, and Art Rooney, there were actually, I remember as a kid, you go to a league meeting, and there were fist fights. right in the meeting. Somebody would get up and say, you son of a bitch, you're wrong about this, you're wrong about that, and people would be rolling on the floor. Luckily, there was no media around like today to watch it, although today's meetings are very boring. But in the end, the one thing that they all did, and I'll give you an example, and Ron, I talk about it in the book. Bert Bell had the worst team, founded the Eagles, kept it going. Art Rooney used to send him, because they founded the Eagles and Steelers at the same time. Art Rooney used to send him money in an envelope, $200,000 and $300,000 and $500,000, so Bert Bell could meet the payroll of the Eagles while Rooney was trying to survive. But when he proposed the National Football League draft, which is now Follies Brazier of the NFL, is that basically today, if somebody had proposed that, it would never get through. Everybody wants their own thing, including Kraft and all of them. They all agreed, remember, Hallis with the Bears and the Redskins, but mainly the Giants, they dominated pro football because there was no draft. You go out and sign anybody you wanted. But they all agreed this would be the best thing. The worst teams in inverse order. If you didn't have that, if Bert Bell hadn't, and we talk about this in the book, hadn't invented the draft, none of us would be sitting here tonight talking about the Patriots of pro football. It was going under. Originally, 25 plus teams. Ron, in the Canton showroom with Jim Thorpe, there was originally 30-some teams. By the time they got to Bert Bell and Art Rooney in the 30s, there were only 12. Every team had failed. Without the pro football draft, dead on arrival.